The city hummed with a sound entirely unfamiliar to Elena's ears. It was a different kind of busy than her beloved Chicago. Back home, the noise was a loud, brash symphony of car horns, shouted conversations, and the deep rumble of the L train. Here, the sound was like a constant low murmur, a stream of a language she couldn't yet understand, punctuated by the gentle swish of passing cars and the distant chime from a storefront. She felt the loneliness wrap around her shoulders like a thin, chilly blanket, even in the mild afternoon air. She had been in Seoul for 2 weeks, and the initial excitement of a new job, a new country, had faded into a stark reality of missed connections and quiet evenings in her small apartment. Everything was new, and while new was exciting, it was also incredibly isolating. Her feet seemed to carry her on their own, a homing instinct for a feeling of comfort. That's when she saw it tucked between a brightly lit cosmetics store and a restaurant with sizzling sounds emanating from within. A bookstore, but not just any bookstore. The window display was filled with familiar names. The title spelled out in the comforting curves of the English alphabet. The English Nook. The sign above the door read. It was a beacon. Pushing the door open, a little bell jingled softly overhead, and the smell of old paper and fresh coffee washed over her. It was a smell that knew no country. Smelled like home. The inside was cozy with shelves that reached high up to the ceiling and worn, comfortable armchairs tucked into corners. It was quiet, save for the soft turning of a page from an elderly man in one of the chairs. Elena wandered through the aisles, her fingers gently trailing along the spines of the books. She was looking for a specific one, her favorite romance novel she'd read a dozen times, the one she turned to when she needed to feel like a happy ending was possible. She found the section, her eyes scanning the titles, moving higher and higher. There it was on the very top shelf, just out of her comfortable reach. She stretched her arms, standing on her tiptoes, but her fingertips only brushed against the dusty bottom of the book's spine. A small sigh of frustration escaped her lips. It figured even the simple comfort of a familiar book was being kept from her. "Let me help you," a voice said, quiet and gentle from behind her right shoulder. She turned a little startled. Standing there was a young man. He had dark, kind eyes and hair that fell softly across his forehead. He wasn't overly tall, but he was certainly tall enough to solve her problem. He gave her a small, shy smile that made the corners of his eyes crinkle slightly. Without waiting for an answer, he easily reached up, his long fingers carefully plucking the very book she was reaching for from its high perch. He held it out to her. "Thank you," Elena said, her voice a bit breathless from the surprise. "My pride was taking a beating." He chuckled, a warm, pleasant sound. "This shelf is a pride eater for almost everyone. I think the owner does it on purpose." He glanced at the book's cover. "This is a good one, a classic. You've read it?" Elena asked, surprised. She took the book, their fingers brushing for a fleeting second. "A long time ago," he said. "My name is Kai. I'm Elena." They stood there for a moment in a slightly awkward but not unpleasant silence. Kai shifted his weight. "Are you new to the city? I haven't seen you in here before. I just moved from Chicago for work. I teach English." Elena found the words tumbling out more easily than they had with anyone else in weeks. "This place, it's the first thing that's felt normal." Kai's face lit up with understanding. "I know that feeling. I spent a year studying in Boston. I lived in a used bookstore for the first month. It was my safe place." He pointed to a different shelf. "The owner here has a great collection of art books and graphic novels, too. That's more my area. I'm a concept artist for video games." They began to walk slowly through the aisles. As they talked, Kai showed her a section with beautiful books filled with paintings and sketches of fantasy worlds, explaining his job. Elena talked about her students back in Chicago and her new class here. The conversation flowed easily like a river finding its natural path. The loneliness that had clung to Elena began to melt away, replaced by a warm, glowing feeling of connection. They talked about favorite foods, the best places to see the city lights, and the strange difficulty of finding good peanut butter in Seoul. They talked until the sun began to set, casting long orange beams through the front window of the shop. Elena realized with a start how much time had passed. "Oh, I had no idea it was so late. I should probably let you go." "No, it's okay," Kai said quickly, a hint of disappointment in his eyes. "It was really nice talking to you." "It was nice talking to you too, Kai. Thank you again for the rescue." She held up the book and smiled. As she turned to walk towards the cashier, Kai suddenly said, "Wait." He rummaged in the small bag he was carrying, pulling out a sketchbook and a pencil. He tore a small corner from a blank page, scribbled something on it, and hurried after her. He held out the tiny piece of paper, his ears turning a distinct shade of pink. A chaotic and wonderful place Kai insisted she had to see. He was a perfect guide, patient and knowledgeable, pointing out things she would have never noticed on her own. He bought her a hot sweet pastry filled with red bean paste, watching her face with an amused smile as she took her first surprised bite. "It's not a Chicago deep dish pizza," he said with a laugh, "but it's a good start." They walked for hours past stalls selling everything from live octopus to handmade pottery. The noise of the crowd, a comfortable buffer that made talking easy. Elena found herself laughing more than she had in months, the sound feeling foreign and wonderful in her own ears. Kai was different away from the quiet of the bookstore. He was funnier, more animated, his eyes lighting up when he explained the history behind a certain food or the meaning of a traditional craft. When he casually took her hand to guide her through a particularly dense crowd, his palm was warm and sure, and he didn't let go even once they were through. Elena felt a jolt, a simple electric connection that started in her hand and traveled all the way up her arm, settling deep in her chest. The dates that followed painted a new, brighter picture of the city for Elena. It was no longer a place of lonely anonymity, but a canvas for their growing connection. They spent a drizzly afternoon in a massive art museum, speaking in hushed tones in front of dramatic ancient landscapes. Kai would stand for a long time before certain paintings, his head tilted, and he would whisper to her about the artist's use of light and shadow, his passion for art evident in every soft-spoken word. On a sun-drenched day, they took a long walk along the old city wall, the ancient stonework winding through a modern park. They found a quiet bench overlooking the sprawling metropolis below, the cityscape, a jagged, beautiful silhouette against the setting sun. It was there in the quiet golden light of the evening that the conversation turned inward, shedding its light, easy skin. Kai talked about the pressure he felt from his family, their quiet expectations for his life, their subtle disappointment that his career in games wasn't something more traditional, like being a doctor or an engineer. He spoke of his own fears of not being good enough, of his art one day failing him. It was a vulnerability Elena hadn't seen in him before, and it made her feel trusted. The city lights began to twinkle on below them, one by one, like stars coming out to listen. Emboldened by his honesty, Elena took a deep, shaky breath. The hum of the city seemed to fade into a distant whisper. I've never done this before," she said, her voice barely above a murmur. She didn't look at him, instead focusing on a single bright light far off in the distance. I've dated a little, but I've never been in love. Not even close. The whole idea of it kind of terrifies me." She finally chanced to glance at him, expecting to see pity or worse, amusement, but his face was soft, his expression completely serious and attentive. "I'm always so scared of getting it wrong," she continued, her words tumbling out now. "Of getting my heart completely broken." Kai was silent for a long moment, simply looking at her. He then slowly reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. His touch was grounding. "Elena," he said, his voice firm and gentle all at once. "Your heart is safe with me. We can go as slow as you need. There is no wrong way to do this. Every single step with you, whether it's just holding your hand like this or getting to hear you laugh, feels special to me." The words were so simple, so direct, and they washed over Elena, dissolving the cold knot of fear that had lived inside her for so long. No one had ever said anything like that to her. He wasn't promising her a fairy tale. He was promising her patience. He was promising her safety. It was the most romantic thing she had ever heard. A new layer of comfort settled over them after that night. The touches became more frequent, more intentional. A hug when they greeted each other lasted a few seconds longer, becoming a true embrace where she could rest her head against his shoulder and feel the solid, steady beat of his heart. A goodbye kiss on the cheek one evening, soft and fleeting, made her skin tingle for hours afterward. The air between them seemed to crackle with a new acknowledged energy, a silent conversation of wanting and waiting. The shift culminated on a Friday night at his apartment. It was the first time she had seen where he lived. It was surprisingly tidy, dominated by a large desk with 2 computer monitors covered in breathtaking digital landscapes and sketches of fantasy characters. The rest of the space was filled with books, plants, and the comfortable clutter of a life lived creatively. They ordered food, and it arrived in a multitude of small boxes and containers, covering his low coffee table in a feast of colors and smells. They ate sitting on cushions on the floor, talking and laughing, their knees touching. After they finished, Kai put on some soft instrumental music and they cleaned up together, moving around his small kitchen in an easy, synchronized dance. Later, they sat on his couch side by side, looking through one of his physical sketchbooks. He was shy about it at first, but Elena insisted, and he slowly turned the pages, showing her drawings from his childhood, from his time in Boston, and recent quick sketches of city scenes. Then he turned a page, and Elena's breath caught. It was her. It was a detailed, beautifully shaded pencil drawing of her profile, her head slightly tilted, a small smile on her lips. It was the face she saw in the mirror, but seen through his eyes. Softer, more thoughtful, more beautiful. "Kai," she whispered, her eyes suddenly stinging with tears. "When did you?" "After our second date," he admitted, his voice low. "I couldn't get your face out of my head. I had to try and capture it." He looked genuinely nervous, searching her face for her reaction. In that moment, any last remaining wall around Elena's heart crumbled to dust. She reached out and cupped his face, her thumb gently stroking his cheek. She leaned in and kissed him. It started soft and slow, a tender exploration. But then something shifted. The careful patience they had practiced melted away in the heat of the moment, replaced by a wave of pure, unspoken desire that had been building for weeks. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more passionate. It was a conversation without words, full of everything they had been too shy or too scared to say aloud. His hands came up to cradle her face, then slid into her hair, pulling her closer. Her own hands fisted in the soft fabric of his shirt, holding on as if she might float away. The sketchbook tumbled, forgotten, to the floor. The world outside his windows, the entire city of Seoul, ceased to exist. There was only the feel of his lips on hers, the sound of their ragged breathing, the overwhelming sense of rightness. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his own dark and full of a silent question. In answer she stood, taking his hand and leading him from the couch. The journey to his bedroom was a blur of soft touches and whispered names. What followed was not a frantic rush, but a slow, deliberate discovery. It was a night of firsts for Elena, not just of physical intimacy, but of a profound emotional nakedness. In the quiet dark, with only the city's glow filtering through the blinds, there was no fear, no hesitation. There was only Kai's gentle hands, his reverent whispers against her skin, and the breathtaking feeling of being truly, completely seen and cherished. It was not just two bodies coming together. It was two souls finally fully choosing to trust each other with everything they were. Later, as she lay curled against his side, her head on his chest, listening to the steady, strong rhythm of his heartbeat slow to a calm, sleeping pace, she knew this was what all the songs and books were about. This was the thing that was worth being brave for. The golden period that followed felt like a dream from which Elena never wanted to wake. The city of Seoul, once a landscape of lonely echoes, had been completely remade. Its streets were now a map of their shared memories. The bench on Namsan Mountain was where they had shared their first real kiss under a blanket of stars. The tiny hidden dumpling shop in a back alley was their spot. The Mrs. Park who ran it always greeting them with a wide gap-toed smile and an extra serving of kimchi. Kai's apartment was no longer just his. It was theirs, a sanctuary filled with the mingled scents of his charcoal pencils and her favorite vanilla-scented candle. They had built a beautiful, bustling life in the heart of South Korea. A life woven together from shared meals, late-night conversations, and the deep abiding peace that comes from being wholly known and accepted by another person. Elena's one-year teaching contract, which had once seemed like an eternity, now felt like a sand timer draining with alarming speed. The future, which had been a hazy, distant concept, began to sharpen into a pressing, unavoidable reality. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, stark and official in her inbox. It was the offer from a prestigious private school in Chicago, the kind of opportunity she had worked towards for years. It was a fantastic position with a salary and benefits that were undeniably a step up in her career. It was everything she had thought she wanted before she had known what it was like to have her hand held by Kai on a crowded subway, or to wake up to the sound of his soft breathing beside her. The excitement that should have bubbled up at the sight of the offer letter was immediately doused by a cold, leaden dread that settled in the pit of her stomach. That evening, she showed Kai the email on her laptop screen, her hands trembling slightly. The silence in the room after he finished reading was thick and heavy, broken only by the distant hum of city traffic. Kai's face, usually so open and expressive, became a careful, neutral mask as he processed the words. He was quiet for a long time, just looking at the screen. "This is incredible, Elena," he finally said, his voice carefully measured. "You should be so proud. This is what you wanted." "It was what I wanted," she whispered, her voice cracking on the last word. Before they tried to talk about it logically like two rational adults, they sat at his small kitchen table and listed the pros and cons, their voices low and strained. He could not easily leave his job. His project was in a critical phase. She could not turn down this offer. It was a career-defining moment. The conversation went in circles, each loop tightening the knot of anxiety in Elena's chest. They were speaking different languages, the language of practical dreams clashing violently with the language of the heart. For the next few days, a strange polite distance grew between them. They were still together, still sharing meals in a bed, but a pane of invisible glass had slid into place. They were careful with their words, avoiding the giant, unspoken thing that loomed over them. The easy laughter was scarce, replaced by long, thoughtful silences. Elena felt like she was watching the colors of their beautiful life together begin to slowly drain away, fading to a worrisome gray. One afternoon, a week after the offer, Kai told her he had to work late. The excuse felt flimsy, and a fresh wave of fear washed over Elena. Was this it? Was he pulling away because the problem was too big to solve? The hours dragged by. She tried to read, to watch a movie, to do anything to quiet the frantic beating of her heart, but it was useless. As evening deepened into night, her phone finally buzzed. It was a single text from Kai. "Can you meet me at the bookstore?" Now, confusion and a flicker of hope warded within her. Why the bookstore? She pulled on her jacket and hurried out into the cool night air, her footsteps quick and anxious on the pavement. The city was quieting down. The English Nook was dark, its closed sign facing the street, but the door was unlocked. Pushing it open, the familiar scent of old books and wood polish enveloped her. A single small lamp was lit on the main counter, casting a warm, intimate pool of light in the vast shadowy space. And there, standing in the very aisle where they had first met, was Kai. He looked nervous, his hands clenched tightly in front of him, but his eyes held a determined, unwavering light as they met hers. "Kai, what's going on?" Elena asked, her voice echoing slightly in the empty store. He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice steady but soft. "I've been thinking about practical things and impossible things. And I realized I was thinking about it all wrong." He took a step toward her. "I was thinking about my career here and your career there. I was thinking about distance and visas and all the reasons why this couldn't work." He took another step, now close enough for her to see the deep emotion in his dark eyes. "And then I thought about coming home to an apartment that you weren't in. I thought about this city without your laugh in it. I thought about a future where I only got to see you through a screen." His voice wavered for the first time, and that future felt empty. It felt completely wrong. Elena's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Tears were already welling in her eyes, blurring his image. "I don't want a practical life, Elena," Kai said, his voice growing stronger, filled with a conviction that seemed to light up the entire dark bookstore. "I want a life with you." Then he slowly, deliberately got down on one knee right there on the worn wooden floor between the shelves of romance and adventure. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple, beautiful silver band with a single sparkling diamond. Elena brought her hands to her mouth, a choked sob escaping her lips. "My home isn't in Seoul," Kai said, looking up at her, his love for her shining openly on his face. "It isn't an apartment or a city. My home is you, Elena. It's wherever you are. Please, let me come to Chicago with you. Let's build our home there together. Will you marry me?" The world stopped. All the fear, the anxiety, the impossible choice, it all shattered and fell away at his words. There was no decision to make anymore. There was only this man, this love, this forever he was offering. She breathed out the word. A joyful, tearful release. Yes, Kai? 1,000 times. He slid the ring onto her finger, his own hands shaking. And then he stood pulling her into his arms and kissing her with a passion that held all the promise of their future. They stood there wrapped in each other in the quiet, holy space where their story had begun. The first page in this new, beautiful chapter forever linked. 1 year later, the view from their apartment window was of the glittering skyline of Chicago. A different constellation of city lights, but one that now felt just as much like home. The living room was warm and lived in, a harmonious blend of her things and his. A large canvas print of one of Kai's fantasy landscapes hung beside a framed vintage map of Seoul. On the couch under a soft knitted blanket, Elena sat with her feet tucked up, a well-loved book resting in her lap. Kai was beside her, a sketchbook balanced on his knees, his pencil moving swiftly across the page. He was drawing the scene before him. The cozy room, the city lights beyond the window, and most importantly, the woman beside him, the simple silver band on her finger catching the lamplight. Remember when we thought it was impossible? Elena said softly, not looking up from her book. Kai paused his sketching and looked over at her, a slow, deep smile spreading across his face. He reached out and laid his hand on her bare foot, his thumb making slow, comforting circles. It was only impossible without you, he said simply. They had crossed an ocean for this. They had built a new life from the ground up, facing the challenges of a new country together. Their love the one constant, unshakable foundation. It had not been a fairy tale. It had been better. It had been real. It was in the way he made her coffee every morning just how she liked it, and the way she knew just when he needed a quiet walk to clear his head. It was in the way they still talked for hours, their dreams and fears now completely intertwined. Their love story wasn't about a single dramatic moment, but about the millions of tiny choices they made every single day to choose each other, to build a forever one patient loving moment at a time. And as they sat there together in the peaceful quiet of their own home, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, they both knew without a single doubt that their greatest adventure was only just beginning. If you enjoyed following Elena and Kai's journey from a chance meeting to a love that crossed oceans, be sure to subscribe for more unique and heartfelt romance stories. The first months in Chicago were a whirlwind of adjustments that tested every fiber of their commitment. Kai's visa paperwork became a labyrinth of bureaucratic nightmares, each form requiring documentation that seemed to multiply like Hydra heads. Elena threw herself into her new position at the prestigious Lincoln Academy, where the expectations were as towering as the Chicago skyline and twice as unforgiving. The students were brilliant but demanding, the curriculum rigorous, and the politics among faculty members a minefield she had to navigate with the delicacy of a diplomat. Kai struggled in ways that broke Elena's heart to witness. His English, though excellent, carried the subtle accent that made some clients hesitant to trust his artistic vision. The gaming industry in Chicago was smaller than Seoul's booming market, and the cultural references that had made his work so celebrated in Korea felt foreign and unmarketable in the American Midwest. He spent long days in their cramped one-bedroom apartment, sending portfolio after portfolio into what felt like a digital void, waiting for responses that rarely came. The apartment itself was a far cry from his spacious Seoul studio or her cozy teaching flat back home. Wedged between a laundromat and a corner store that sold lottery tickets and expired milk, it had thin walls that carried every argument from the neighbors and windows that faced a brick wall so close Elena could touch it if she leaned out far enough. The heating was inconsistent, the hot water unpredictable, and the kitchen so small that only one of them could cook at a time. But they were together, and that made even the worst days bearable. Kai learned to make Chicago-style deep dish pizza from a YouTube tutorial, his first attempt resulting in a soggy mess that they ate anyway, laughing until their sides hurt. Elena discovered a Korean grocery store 40 minutes away by train and surprised him one evening with all the ingredients for his mother's kimchi jjigae, watching his face light up with homesickness and gratitude in equal measure. The real test came during Elena's second semester when the pressure at Lincoln Academy reached a breaking point. The principal, a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, had taken Elena under her wing with the intensity of a military commander training a successor. The workload was crushing. Lesson plans that required innovative approaches to reach gifted students who were often bored by traditional methods. Parent conferences with mothers and fathers who expected their children to be admitted to Ivy League universities and held Elena personally responsible for making that dream reality. Evening tutoring sessions that stretched until 9 or 10 at night, leaving her exhausted and hollow. Kai watched her disappear into this new world of academic excellence and felt himself becoming smaller in their shared space. He tried to be supportive, cooking dinner when she worked late, massaging her shoulders when she finally collapsed on their secondhand couch, but he could see the distance growing between them. Not emotional distance. Their love remained as strong as ever, but a practical distance born from living in different worlds. Elena spoke of students and curricula and standardized test scores, while Kai's days were filled with rejection emails and the slow erosion of his professional confidence. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Elena had mentioned Kai's work to James, a fellow teacher who taught digital arts and had connections in Chicago's growing tech scene. James looked through Kai's portfolio with the eye of someone who understood both artistic merit and market demands. "Your boyfriend is incredibly talented," he told Elena over coffee in the faculty lounge. "But he's marketing himself wrong for this city. Chicago isn't Seoul. The gaming companies here want different things." That conversation led to an introduction, which led to a freelance project, which led to Kai's first real breakthrough in the American market. A small but innovative game development studio was creating an adventure game set in a fantasy version of ancient Korea, and they needed an artist who could bring authenticity to the visual design while making it accessible to Western audiences. Kai's cultural knowledge combined with his artistic skills made him the perfect candidate. The project consumed him in the best possible way. He worked 18-hour days, sketching characters and environments that bridged the gap between his homeland's rich artistic traditions and the storytelling styles that resonated with American gamers. Elena would come home from her own long days to find him hunched over his tablet, stylus moving with the fluid precision of a calligrapher, bringing to life warriors and spirits and landscapes that seemed to glow with their own inner light. When the game launched 6 months later, it was a modest commercial success, but a critical triumph. Gaming blogs praised the visual design as groundbreaking. Industry publications wrote about the seamless blend of cultural authenticity and universal appeal. More importantly for their future, Kai's phone started ringing. Studios wanted to hire the artist who could bring that kind of cultural depth to their projects. Success brought its own challenges. Kai's newfound reputation meant travel to Los Angeles and San Francisco for meetings. Elena's excellence at Lincoln Academy earned her an offer to head the English department, a promotion that would mean even longer hours and greater responsibility. They found themselves ships passing in the night, successful but separated by the very achievements they had worked so hard to attain. The crisis came on a rainy Thursday evening in October. Elena returned from a particularly brutal faculty meeting to find Kai packing a suitcase. For a terrifying moment, her heart stopped. Then she saw the plane ticket on the dresser and realized he was preparing for another business trip, this time to a gaming convention in Seattle where 3 different companies wanted to court him for major projects. "We barely see each other anymore," she said quietly, standing in the doorway of their bedroom. Kai looked up from his packing, saw the exhaustion in her face, and felt something crack inside his chest. "When did we become strangers living in the same apartment?" He abandoned his suitcase and crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "We're not strangers," he whispered into her hair. "We're just tired. We're just trying so hard to build the future we dreamed about that we forgot to live in the present." They talked until dawn, curled together on their narrow bed, acknowledging the ways success had begun to pull them apart. Elena admitted that the promotion, while flattering, would require sacrifices she wasn't sure she wanted to make. Kai confessed that the constant travel was beginning to feel less like opportunity and more like escape from a life that had become all work and no joy. The solution came to them gradually, like sunrise after a long night. Elena would take the department head position, but with clearly defined boundaries. No more than 2 evenings per week for school events. No work brought home on weekends. A commitment to preserving the space they had built together. Kai would be selective about projects, choosing quality over quantity, focusing on clients who respected his time and vision rather than those who saw him as just another freelancer to exploit. They instituted new traditions. Sunday morning walks along the lakefront, regardless of weather. Cooking together on Wednesday nights. Experimenting with fusion recipes that combined Elena's American comfort food roots with Kai's Korean heritage. Friday evening dates that were sacred, no phones, no work talk, just the two of them rediscovering the connection that had brought them together in that Seoul bookstore. The apartment slowly transformed from a cramped temporary space into something that felt like home. Kai's artwork covered the walls, a mix of professional pieces and personal sketches, including several new drawings of Elena, older now, marked by the challenges they had faced, but somehow more beautiful for the strength those challenges had revealed. Elena created a reading nook by the window, complete with the romance novel she had been reaching for on the day they met, now accompanied by a small library of books they had discovered together. Spring brought new opportunities that felt different from the frantic pace of their first Chicago year. Elena was offered a chance to develop a new curriculum program, one that would allow her to travel to other schools and share the innovative teaching methods she had developed. The position would mean some travel, but also flexibility and the chance to impact education on a broader scale. Kai was approached by a documentary filmmaker who wanted to create a series about cultural fusion in modern art, with Kai as both subject and collaborator. They made these decisions together, weighing each opportunity against their shared priorities. Would this bring them closer to the life they wanted to build together? Would it honor both their individual ambitions and their commitment to each other? Would they still be able to sit together on Sunday mornings, sharing coffee and comfortable silence as the city woke up around them? The documentary project became a love letter not just to Kai's artistic journey, but to their relationship. The filmmaker captured them cooking together in their tiny kitchen, Kai teaching Elena to fold mandu while she helped him practice the English phrases he would need for upcoming presentations. She filmed them walking through the neighborhoods that had become theirs, pointing out the Korean restaurant where they celebrated good news, the bookstore where they browsed on rainy afternoons, the park bench where they had their first real fight and their first real reconciliation. When the documentary aired, it sparked conversations about love, immigration, and the courage required to build a life across cultural boundaries. But for Elena and Kai, watching themselves on screen was a reminder of how far they had traveled, not just geographically, but emotionally. The uncertain young woman who had reached for a book on a high shelf and the shy artist who had helped her had become partners who could weather any storm because they had learned to weather them together. 2 years after arriving in Chicago, they moved into a larger apartment with windows that actually faced the street, a kitchen where they could both cook simultaneously, and a spare room that Kai converted into a proper studio. Elena hung her teaching certificates on the wall next to Kai's industry awards, a visual representation of the life they had built through equal measures of ambition and compromise. Their love story had evolved from the passionate intensity of new romance into something deeper and more durable. It was found in the way Kai still made her coffee exactly the way she liked it, even on mornings when he was rushing to catch an early flight. It was in the way Elena always called him before making major decisions, not because she needed his permission, but because she genuinely valued his perspective. It was in the way they had learned to fight fairly, to apologize quickly, and to celebrate each other's successes without jealousy or competition. Friends and colleagues often asked them about the secret to making an international relationship work, expecting some profound wisdom about love conquering all. But the truth was simpler and more complex than any platitude. It was about choosing each other every single day, even when it would be easier to choose work or ambition or the comfortable path that required less compromise. It was about building a shared language that went beyond words, a way of communicating that honored both their individual histories and their collective dreams. On their 3rd anniversary of arriving in Chicago, they returned to the Korean restaurant where they had celebrated Kai's first major freelance contract. Mrs. Kim, the owner who had adopted them as surrogate children, brought them a special dinner of all their favorite dishes, including the kimchi jjigae that still reminded Kai of home and the bulgogi that had been Elena's introduction to Korean cuisine. As they ate and talked and laughed, Elena realized that the question was no longer whether they could make this work. They had already proven that to themselves and to everyone who had doubted whether love could bridge the gap between their different worlds. The question now was what they would build next, what dreams they would chase together, what new adventures awaited them in the city that had become home. Kai reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing the wedding ring they had added to her engagement ring 6 months earlier in a small ceremony attended by Elena's family and Kai's parents who had flown in from Seoul. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked quietly. "The way things were before, when it was just us against the world." Elena considered the question seriously. She missed the intensity of those early days, the feeling that they were writing their love story on blank pages with no rules to follow. But she didn't miss the uncertainty, the constant worry about whether they would survive the challenges that seemed to arise daily. "I miss the simplicity sometimes," she said finally. "But I love the complexity we've built. I love that our problems now are good problems. Which project to take, which opportunity to pursue, how to fit all our dreams into one lifetime. I love that we're not just surviving anymore. We're thriving." They walked home through the streets that had become as familiar as any neighborhood Elena had known growing up. Past the corner where Kai had first confessed that he was falling in love with her, spoken in a mixture of English and Korean that had made her heart race. Past the coffee shop where they had spent their first winter weekend, learning each other's languages one word at a time. Past the community college where Elena had taken Korean lessons and Kai had audited her English literature class, both of them students again in service of better understanding each other's worlds. Their apartment welcomed them with the scent of the jasmine plant Elena had managed to keep alive despite her notorious lack of gardening skills, and the soft glow of Kai's computer monitors displaying his latest work. This was home now, not because of the place, but because of the life they had created within it. It was home because it was where Kai worked late into the night, stylus dancing across his tablet, while Elena graded papers beside him, each of them pursuing their passions while remaining connected by invisible threads of shared purpose. It was home because it was where they planned their future, spreading travel brochures across their coffee table as they debated whether to visit Elena's extended family in California or take Kai back to Seoul to see his friends and show Elena more of the country that had shaped him. It was home because it was where they fought about whose turn it was to do dishes and made up by cooking elaborate dinners together, turning their tiny kitchen into a playground of culinary experimentation. As they prepared for bed, following the nighttime routine they had developed without conscious planning, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that first moment in the bookstore when a stranger had helped her reach a book on a high shelf, through the months of tentative courtship and the decision to cross an ocean together, to this ordinary Tuesday evening that felt extraordinary because they were living it together. Their love story wasn't finished. It was still being written, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one small act of devotion at a time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. Kai had a presentation to give to a potential client who wanted him to design characters for a major gaming franchise. Elena had a difficult parent conference to navigate and lesson plans to finalize for a new unit on contemporary global literature. But tonight, they were simply Elena and Kai, curled together in the bed they had chosen together, in the apartment they had made into a home, in the city where they had learned that love was not just about the grand gestures and dramatic declarations. It was about the quiet moments between the adventures, the steady commitment that turned two separate lives into one shared story, the daily choice to build something beautiful together even when the world seemed determined to pull them apart. As sleep claimed them, Elena's last conscious thought was of gratitude. For the book on the high shelf that had been just out of reach, for the kind stranger who had helped her, for the courage to say yes to love even when it meant leaving everything familiar behind. For all the unexpected turns that had led them to this moment, this place, this life they had built together one patient, loving decision at a time.